She called the police, but first she called God. And what happened next shook the mansion to its knees. The Hargrove mansion was a monument to wealth, a towering edifice of marble, glass, and silent heavy air. Its library in particular was less a place of reading and more a shrine to ostentation, with calfskin bindings and a massive oak crucifix dominating one wall. It was here, amidst the scent of aged paper and polished wood, that 7-year-old Elara Hargrove sat, her small frame convulsing with silent sobs. She was a child of porcelain and silk, a fragile flower in an overly grand garden. "Daddy said it wouldn't hurt," she whispered, the English words thin as thread, swallowed by the cavernous room. Miriam, the housekeeper, stopped her work. A woman whose skin was the color of rich earth and whose hands knew the relentless geometry of scrubbing, she possessed eyes that had seen too much and yet still held a quiet, unshakable light. Miriam's hands, usually steady as stone, trembled as she held the silver polish. Her gaze, however, did not waver. It rose to the imposing crucifix, where the figure of Christ hung, head bowed in eternal compassion. In that profound moment of silence, Miriam's heart, a heart tempered by a life of trials, spoke its deepest truth. It was a prayer not of eloquent words, but of desperate need. "Lord, if I am right, grant me strength. If I am wrong, grant me grace." Elara's ragged breathing and the faint, wet sound of her tears became God's first piercing reply, a silent, desperate cry, recognizable only to a listening soul. Miriam knelt beside the child, her dark skirt pooling around her. She didn't press, didn't patronize. She waited, her presence a shelter. "Tell me, little one." Miriam's voice was a low, comforting melody. "What did your daddy ask you to do?" Elara finally spoke, the words spilling out in a torrent of fear and shame. He had made her carry a heavy iron-bound trunk up 3 flights of stairs over and over. "He said it was to make me strong, to be a proper Hargrove," she choked, gripping Miriam's apron. "But he was angry. He locked the door and watched, and when I dropped it, he didn't help. He just said I was weak, a disappointment." Elara pulled up the cuff of her silk sleeve, revealing the truth. A lattice of purple and yellow bruises blooming on her small forearms, where the iron straps had dug deep. "But Mommy won't believe me," Elara whispered, the sentence a death knell of despair. "She always says Daddy knows best. She sees only the outside." A cold, sharp memory lanced through Miriam, the years she spent as a child, silent, flinching under the cruel hand of her stepfather. The agonizing truth hit her. Silence is not protection. It is complicity. Miriam gently covered the bruises with a sleeve, her eyes now fierce, a granite-like resolve hardening her gaze. She took Elara's hand, her grip small but firm, a physical anchor. "Child, some men forget that God watches in the hidden places." Miriam's voice was low, a sacred oath. "They build great houses, but they forget the foundation of righteousness. We will not be silent for them." Just then, a shaft of weak afternoon sunlight found the crucifix, illuminating the face of the figure, a silent promise that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, would soon be brought to light. The library door swung inward with an air of proprietorship. Mr. Jonathan Hargrove, tall, impeccably dressed, and radiating a chilling absolute authority, stood on the threshold. He was a man accustomed to having the world move out of his way. His arrival brought a palpable drop in temperature, a shadow falling over the room. He saw Miriam kneeling beside his weeping daughter, and his face contorted in a sneer of contempt. "What is this melodrama, Miriam? Get back to your duties." He spoke to his daughter as if she were a defective object. "Stop crying, Elara. You're embarrassing me." Miriam rose slowly, a figure of humble cloth opposing a mountain of tailored arrogance. "Sir, your daughter is in pain. Not just physical. She is afraid." Hargrove laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Pain is a necessary discipline. It's what separates the winners from the weaklings. And let's be frank, Miriam, she is not my child in the way that matters. She's an obligation, a burden." The air crackled with a dangerous tension. Miriam felt the hot tide of fear, but it was eclipsed by a fierce, protective love, a borrowed strength. She met his cold gaze unflinchingly. "Every child is a child of God, Mr. Hargrove, and God gives no man the right to cause harm to the least of his flock." Hargrove's jaw tightened. He took a menacing step closer, his voice dropping to a furious hiss. "You forget yourself, woman. You are an employee, a cleaner of floors. You're nothing in this house." Miriam's response was soft, a whisper that somehow cut deeper than any shout. Her eyes fixed on the image of the Christ on the cross. "That is true, sir. But the Lord also once washed the feet of others. Humility is often a greater power than wealth." The statement hit him like a physical blow. The reference to the Bible, the calm authority in her voice, it pierced the armor of his arrogance. He was momentarily stunned. He had no retort, for her words were built on a foundation of truth that his money could not buy, nor his lawyers annul. Hargrove's silence was brief, replaced by a volcanic fury. "I'll have you fired, blacklisted. You will never work again," he roared, his face mottled with rage. He lunged toward Elara, as if to drag her away. Miriam didn't flinch. She gently pulled Elara behind her skirt, her hand finding her small, worn phone. She bowed her head quickly, her prayer a rapid, fervent vow. "God, I give the judgment to you, but the justice on this earth, I will do my part." Then she pressed the 3 digits that change everything, 911. Hargrove heard the dial tone and went ballistic. He tried to snatch the phone, but Miriam twisted away, her voice clear and strong, into the receiver. "Yes, I need the police. At the Hargrove residence. There's a child abuse situation. Yes, severe. Hurry, please." He was pacing now, a caged beast. "You fool! You utter fool! I have money. I have power. I have lawyers who will crucify you. They'll say you're lying, unhinged, trying to extort me." Miriam hung up, her face utterly calm, a profound peace settling over her. She looked at the man who had everything and was about to lose it all. "Money cannot buy salvation, Mr. Hargrove, and it cannot buy God's forgiveness. The only currency that matters now is the truth." A tense silence descended, punctuated only by the rapid, terrified beat of Elara's heart against Miriam's thigh. They waited, the humble servant and the frightened child, against the arrogant Titan, for the sound of the approaching sirens. The police arrived, 2 figures in blue, professional and skeptical of a call from such an address. Mr. Hargrove instantly composed himself, slipping into the role of the aggrieved, misunderstood patriarch. "Officer, this woman is delusional, a disgruntled employee. I assure you, my daughter is perfectly fine." He looked at Elara, his eyes issuing a silent, potent threat. The child's lips trembled. She looked at her father, then at Miriam, then at the police officer. Her small world was collapsing, and the terror of contradicting her father was almost paralyzing. But then she remembered Miriam's gentle strength, her whisper about God watching. She took a shuddering breath. Daddy said it wouldn't hurt, but it did. It was a small voice, but in the echoing silence of the library, it was a thunderclap. The older officer knelt beside Alara and gently pulled up her sleeve. When he saw the network of dark bruises, the air seemed to congeal. The room became suffocatingly heavy, illuminated only by the light from the window, which cast the shadow of the crucifix long and dark across the polished floor. The officer didn't need to ask for more. The silent evidence was overwhelming. He rose slowly and looked Mr. Hargrove directly in the eye, his voice devoid of emotion, the voice of the law. "Mr. Hargrove, you can speak with your lawyer later. You're coming with us." The image of the powerful man momentarily stripped of his wealth and arrogance, his hands being secured behind his back, was a silent sermon on the fleeting nature of earthly power. Just as Mr. Hargrove was being led away, the front door opened, and Mrs. Hargrove rushed in, a woman sculpted by couture and social expectations, who had always believed that reputation and luxury were the highest blessings. She stopped, seeing the police, her husband in handcuffs, and her daughter, weeping but sheltered by the housekeeper, her carefully constructed world shattered like expensive crystal. For the first time, she saw the reality, not the facade. She saw the fear in Alara's eyes, the bruises, and the quiet dignity of Miriam. She collapsed, not in a faint, but onto her knees, all pretense gone. "I forgot," she wailed, tears streaming down her immaculate face. "I forgot that God gave me this child to love, not to delegate to power or neglect for my comfort. I was blind." She rushed to Alara, pulling her into a desperate, remorseful embrace. Mr. Hargrove tried to shout a final protest, an accusation against Miriam, but the police escort held him firm. Mrs. Hargrove looked up at Miriam, her eyes red, raw with shame and realization. "Miriam, you are the only one in this house who still had a voice of conscience. You were my eyes and my will." Miriam simply shook her head, her gaze soft. "No, ma'am, that was not my voice you heard. That was the voice of God, still whispering in the heart of every mother, even when the rest of the world is loud." The three of them, Alara, Mrs. Hargrove, and Miriam, left the mansion together as the new day broke. The early morning light pierced the clouds, striking the large, ornate statue of the Madonna and Child that stood guard at the estate's entrance. Alara leaned against Miriam's side, her voice barely audible. "It still hurts, but I know I'm safe now." Miriam smiled, a true, weary, victorious smile, and placed a comforting hand on the child's small shoulder. "Pain fades, child, but faith, the belief in goodness and the courage to act on it, that stays forever." In the distance, the faint, comforting chime of a church bell rang, a gentle yet resonant peal. It was heaven's quiet reply to a small, courageous human act of love and justice. Final message: the unheard prayer. Not all prayers are heard by the ear. Some are heard by the heart and answered by action. God doesn't always send angels with wings. He sends housekeepers with faith.